the old woman faintly said. She had noticed the shock on Lin Ming's face as he read through the jade slip. But she didn't ask further because it wasn't her concern at all. She was only here to provide information and receive payment. I'm satisfied. Lin Ming believed that the information coming from Heaven's Secret was true. If they were able to stand tall in Divine Rune City where there were so many powerhouses and also become the largest intelligence network in this city, then it would have been impossible to reach these heights by swindling their way here. Moreover, the Celestial Tyrant Manual indeed existed. But, I want to ask something. How can I contact this Heaven's Net third leader? Lin Ming guessed that a behind-the-scenes leader of an assassin organization was mostly a mysterious figure. Wanting to make contact with him wouldn't be easy at all. The old woman said, consider this information a free gift to you. Wanting to make contact with the Heaven's Net third leader is extremely difficult, and all I know is that this person's code name is Blood Moon. This person's whereabouts are all a mystery, and if you are thinking about joining Heaven's Net to find them, then you will be wasting your time. This is because Heaven's Net doesn't accept new members like yourself. Most of the people in their ranks start out as extremely talented children that they take in. These people have all grown up in Heaven's Net and have been trained in that hellish environment, making all of them loyal and devoted to their organization. Lin Ming wasn't surprised by this at all. An assassin organization particularly focused on the loyalty and confidentiality of their members. Many of them wore masks for their entire lives, and even their team members wouldn't know their true appearance or name, only knowing them by their code name. Assassin organizations most loved looking for orphans and children that were extremely good at stealing and pickpocketing. By raising these people from their childhood and training them into sublime killers, these people would be utterly loyal to the organization and their backgrounds would also be clean. Senior, you said that most of the people from Heaven's Net were raised since childhood, but what about the rest? The old woman said, the rest have either been thoroughly inspected by Heaven's Net for a long time, or they have been guaranteed by extremely important individuals of Heaven's Net. These types of people are normally extremely talented individuals, for instance, Divine Runic Masters or Alchemists. No matter how perfect the training system of Heaven's Net is, it is impossible for them to train Divine Runic Grandmasters or Alchemist Grandmasters. Otherwise, there would be no need for an existence like the Divine Runic Master Guild. However, as an assassin organization, it is impossible for them to lack talented individuals in those aspects, thus they can only take in Divine Runic Masters, Alchemists, and Refiners after they have been trained. If you wanted to make contact with Heaven's Net's third leader, then being introduced by Divine Runic Masters or Alchemists is the best way to go about it. This is because the Heaven's Net third leader has a high need of pills, and he is also needing people to refine them. If you are a Divine Runic Grandmaster or Grandmaster Alchemist, then you won't even need to look for him, he will look for you. The old woman slowly said. Since Blood Moon dual cultivated in body and energy, he certainly needed pills. Let alone Blood Moon, even someone like Lin Ming who experienced lucky chance after lucky chance needed pills and materials to the point of suffocating from them. Now, Lin Ming had finished swallowing all God Beast parts he had finished swallowing the 9-star Heaven pill, had finished swallowing the Grand Mist Spirit Bead essence, and had even absorbed Xiao Moxion's primordial yin blood to bring himself into harmony. If he wanted to continue training, then he would really be nothing but a destitute beggar with nothing to his name. Senior, do you think I am an alchemist or something? Lin Ming ruefully smiled. That's not my problem. If you know any Grandmaster Alchemists or Divine Runic Grandmasters, then you can have them introduce you. I've already provided you with the method on how to make contact, so what else do you have to ask me? Nothing, Lin Ming helplessly said. Out of all the people this person could be, they had to be a leader of an assassin organization. This type of person was usually secretive in their movements, a divine dragon that never showed their face, so where would he begin looking for them? Alright. If you have any other information you wish to inquire into, then feel free to visit. The old woman expressionlessly saw her guests out. Like this, Lin Ming and Xiao Moxion left Heaven's Secret Pavilion. Lin Ming, what was in that jade slip that surprised you so much? And you even have to ask about an assassin organization. Xiao Moxion asked Lin Ming as soon as they left. Lin Ming answered without hiding anything from her. After Xiao Moxion heard this, she pressed her eyebrows together and said, is it that strange? Reasonably speaking, your Celestial Tyrant Manual should be a singularly unique copy. If so, then the Celestial Tyrant Manual that Blood Moon possesses should have been two parts of the whole to the one that you have. It's only that they were separated, and they were separated so long ago. The first half was left in an ancient ruin within the Divine Realm, and the second half came all the way to the Asura Road. I wonder how this is related. I think it's strange too. It seems there is some mystery to this code named Blood Moon. Lin Ming couldn't figure out what the reason was. The only way he would be able to find out the truth was if he met Blood Moon in the future. The truth was that what Lin Ming wanted to know the most was how the Celestial Tyrant Manual was related to the Magic Cube. Was it just a coincidence that the first half of it was found together with the Magic Cube? Unfortunately, the Verdant Feather World King had died long ago, so this mystery was hard to solve. If he could see the second half of the Celestial Tyrant Manual, would he be able to find some clues about the Magic Cube? This was something that Lin Ming deeply cared about, even more so than the 9 stars of the Dao Palace cultivation method itself. After all, the Magic Cube was Lin Ming's most important treasure. His initial rise to fame had relied upon the magic cube, and as Lin Ming stepped into the Divine Lord realm and his cultivation continued to increase, he would be able to control more and more strength of the magic cube. The magic cube would eventually become Lin Ming's most powerful magic tool. In the future, he might need to use the magic cube to kill his enemies. In the future great calamity of humanity, the magic cube would become one of Lin Ming's greatest strengths. Any secret regarding the magic cube was extremely important to him. What do you plan on doing? Xiao Moxian shrugged. Have you thought about becoming a divine runic master? You should be able to meet this third leader like that, right? Don't you have some experience with inscription technique? But it does seem that the Asura Road's inscription technique is far more profound than that of the divine realm, and they have even combined it with god runes. How could I possibly do that? Lin Ming ruefully smiled. My inscription technique is too shameful to even show others, much less combine with god runes. How could it be that easy? As Lin Ming spoke to her, he immediately perked up. Inscription technique combined with god runes. God runes, that's right. A brilliant light flashed in Lin Ming's mind. The god runes of the Asura Road could be obtained by challengers after they completed certain tasks. They were in a sense traces of the great Tao that corresponded to the heavenly Tao of the Asura Road. They were divided into many different grades, for instance, silver, gold, blue soul, zenith black, and so forth. Once one collected enough god runes, then they could open the final trial of the Asura Road. As for divine runic inscriptions, they were able to use the god runes of the Asura Road in inscription technique, forming the divine runic arts. I have successfully obtained and studied the Asura Sutra first volume, and I understand the Asura Road heavenly Tao. Then, god runes, perhaps I might be able to draw up one myself. As this crazy thought began to grow within Lin Ming's mind, he gained unprecedented clarity of his path. If he could become a divine runic master, then not only would he be able to see the third leader of Heaven's Net, but it would be a great help to paving his future path to the 9 stars of the Tao Palace. Tip, you can use left, right, and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Martial World. Chapter 1547 Divine Runic Masters Guild. Chapter 1547 Divine Runic Masters Guild. Rather than asking others, it was better to ask himself. If Lin Ming wanted to walk down the path of the 9 stars of the Tao Palace, his dependence on pills was far too great. And, in order to make pills for the 9 stars of the Tao Palace, each material needed was rarer than the last. Moreover, to refine them was extremely difficult, something that would be nearly impossible for anyone that wasn't a Grandmaster Alchemist. But, asking a Grandmaster Alchemist for help wasn't easy to begin with. In addition to that, the 9 stars of the Tao Palace often used ancient pill recipes, the kind that alchemists almost never refined. Even if they did, they would need to spend some time familiarizing themselves with the process. This only added another level of difficulty, and a Grandmaster Alchemist might not be willing to waste so much time. Plus, there was no choice that would be as convenient as Lin Ming's own alchemy ability. Divine Runic Master, Alchemist. Perhaps I really need to consider learning them. Lin Ming thought to himself. Then, at this time, a flame lit up in front of him. It was a sound-transmitting talisman sending a message from Yu Liuqing. The general gist of it was that she had completed the Divine Runic Arts assessment with her little brother. Yu Liuqing had been evaluated as a 4th grade inscription master, Divine Runic Arts apprentice. Yu Chaifeng had been evaluated as a 3rd grade inscription master, Divine Runic Arts apprentice. Yu Liuqing's voice in the sound-transmitting talisman was one of joy and happiness. She was clearly more than satisfied with her results. Moreover, they had both been evaluated as possessing extremely high levels of talent and were fortunate enough to be received as disciples by an elder of the Divine Runic Masters Guild. Even though they were only ordinary disciples now, if they performed their duties well, they had a chance of rising to be direct disciples in the future and possibly even being the ones to inherit the legacy of that elder. At that time, Yu Liuqing and Yu Chaifeng would both become characters that could wield power as they pleased, mighty and unapproachable. At the end of the message, Yu Liuqing invited Lin Ming to come and take a look at the Divine Runic Masters Guild. This was just what Lin Ming wanted to do. He wanted to see what sort of scene the Divine Runic Masters Guild was like. The tall pagoda where the Divine Runic Masters Guild was located was filled year-round with the lingering fragrance of incense and medicine. In the skies around the pagoda, strange god runes appeared from time to time. Many martial artists that came to Divine Rune City would often come here for sightseeing and be amazed by the wondrous scenes all around them. As Lin Ming arrived at Divine Rune Pagoda, he saw a line of martial artists all waiting to take the assessment. These people were all uncommon individuals, and in Lin Ming's eyes, many of them could be considered heroic young elites. For Lin Ming to judge someone as a heroic young elite, they had to at least have the ability to stand tall in an ordinary World King Holy Land. What are they doing? Lin Ming could see that the content of the tests these young martial artists were taking was similar to the 7 profound martial houses 10,000 killing array. They would need to enter the illusory magic array and then fight their way through to assess their strength. Brother Lin, over here. The voice of a young girl suddenly called out. Lin Ming turned to see that the one shouting to him was Yu Liuqing. She beckoned to Lin Ming from the crowd, having Lin Ming walk over. Beside Yu Liuqing was Yu Chaifeng, as well as another spirit-ass man. This spirit-ass man had a middle divine lord realm cultivation. Lin Ming guessed that he wasn't too old. For him to have this cultivation at his current age was quite rare. Let me introduce you. This is my senior apprentice brother, 5th grade inscription master, 3rd grade divine runic master Luo Yubai, senior apprentice brother Lu. Senior apprentice brother Lu is the most magnificent direct disciple beneath my master and just completed his test to become a 3rd grade divine runic master last year. Yu Liuqing clearly held deep admiration in her eyes as she introduced Lin Ming to this person. In particular, when she mentioned the words direct disciple and 3rd grade divine runic master, her eyes shined particularly bright as if she couldn't conceal the envy and respect within her. In Divine Rune City, inscription masters were divided into 12 grades and divine runic masters were divided into 9 grades. It wasn't hard to rise in grade as an inscription master, but wanting to rise in grade as a divine runic master was far too hard. In the inner Asura Road, there were numerous 12th grade inscription masters, but there wasn't a single 9th grade divine runic master. In fact, 8th grade divine runic masters were merely myths unto themselves. As for 9th grade divine runic masters, they had only existed in ancient times several billion years ago. To divine runic masters, a 9th grade divine runic master was an existence close to that of God. It was because of this extremely difficult grading system that Yu Liuqing was filled with admiration and yearning towards the term 3rd grade divine runic master. A 3rd grade divine runic master was high enough to receive a courteous reception from almost any large influence. This was particularly true for someone like Luo Yubai. With his extremely high talent, his future was limitless. He might even become a 6th grade divine runic master in the future. This meant that many great world kings would be respectful when seeing Luo Yubai, treating him with the same dignity that they reserved for their descendants. Lin Ming glanced over Luo Yubai. This person was indeed outstanding. From looks, he seemed to be around 23 to 24 years old. He was tall and stood straight with an imposing and immaculate appearance. His forehead was white and even, and he had the aura of a natural-born ruler. On his right eye was a small round lens, something that resembled a monocle. In fact, this was a common magic tool that divine runic masters used and was specifically for analyzing the structure of divine runes. He wore robes of black and white, like ink on water. The base of his clothes were white, and black ink traced lines along them. These lines were designs of divine runic inscriptions and looked natural and pleasing. Hello. Lin Ming politely greeted. Luo Yubai glanced at Lin Ming without any expression. Then, Lin Ming felt a sudden divine sense wash over his body as if it wanted to thrust into his spiritual sea and inner world, completely understanding him. Lin Ming's mind chilled. He immediately summoned a little power from the magic cube, and in addition to the divine mist heart mantra that he studied, he concealed his inner world and spiritual sea, making it so that Luo Yubai only saw faint white mirages. With Luo Yubai's cultivation, it was impossible for him to see through any secrets within Lin Ming. But, no one liked being probed by others, and this was the most basic form of politeness between martial artists. Luo Yubai certainly knew this. But, as a divine runic master and also a spiritas, he was particularly skilled in the aspect of sense. In any normal circumstances, it was impossible for human martial artists of the same step to discover that he was probing them, much less Lin Ming, who was at a much lower cultivation boundary. Upon discovering that there wasn't anything special about Lin Ming, Luo Yubai proceeded to ignore him. Since Lin Ming was a human, this made it so that Luo Yubai had fundamentally no interest in exchanging any pleasantries with him. He pushed up the monocle on his eye and faintly said to Yu Liuqing, "These two are your friends?" "Why, yes." Yu Liuqing was a bit embarrassed as she saw the lack of expression on Luo Yubai's face. Later, don't bring relevant people to the Divine Runic Masters Guild. We'll consider it fine just this once. Luo Yubai used a sound transmission to speak and didn't say it out loud. Then, he turned and left. But, his expression and gestures demonstrated a clear sense of superiority that caused Xiao Moxian's eyes to twitch. She could approximately guess what Luo Yubai had said to Yu Liuqing, otherwise there was no way she would look so awkward. Just who does he think he is? Xiao Moxian pouted. Yu Liuqing was frozen where she was, her face filled with an apologetic expression. Lin Ming didn't care about this at all. He indifferently said, "This person is an outstanding young elite of the Divine Runic Masters Guild and has an inborn sense of superiority. Unless you are an equally outstanding character, it is hard to enter his view." Luo Yubai's cold response hadn't surprised Lin Ming at all. This was because Yu Liuqing's status was insignificant to begin with. She was considered amongst the lowest echelons of the Divine Runic Masters Guild. As for the friends she invited over, they weren't Divine Runic Masters nor were they part of the Soul Race, and their cultivations were only at the peak of the early Divine Lord realm, so who would bother with seeing them? Imagine there is a successor of a royal family. One day, a son of a branch family with no status at all decides to invite his own common city friends for a visit. In the eyes of the world, it is impossible for that successor to treat those common city friends with any sense respect at all. In fact, that successor is likely disinclined to meet with them to begin with, because those common city friends have no value in his eyes. Currently, this other person views us in the same way. Lin Ming's words were all spoken with a true essence sound transmission. Xiao Moxian was still miffed after hearing this. What a snobby little bastard. I can beat up 10 of these people and still not be satisfied. It should be more than 10. Lin Ming smiled. But in terms of inscription technique, he can defeat me 100 to 1, I believe. Lin Ming self-deprecatingly said. These words were not modesty, they were the truth. Xiao Moxian also worried a little for Lin Ming after hearing this. Then how do you plan on learning? Learning these sorts of things will probably require a great deal of time. Yes, but I don't plan on taking a conventional approach, I have other methods available to me. I've never had much contact with the Divine Runic Arts, so it's impossible for me to judge how much time it will take, but I believe that my speed of learning the Divine Runic Arts will be at least 100 times faster than anyone else's. At novel being at. Lin Ming confidently said. Xiao Moxian was left stricken 100 times. Something that would take someone else 100 years to learn, Lin Ming could learn in a single year. Miss Yu, about how old is this senior apprentice brother Luo of yours? Lin Ming only cared about how many years Luo Yubai had spent to become a third-grade Divine Runic Master. Yu Liuqing thought about it for a while. He is over 400 years old. Over 400 years old, could he have used 400 years to learn the Divine Runic Arts? Lin Ming frowned. Although he was confident that he could quickly learn the Divine Runic Arts, taking 400 years to become a third-grade Divine Runic Master seemed a bit too much. How could it be so long? Senior apprentice brother Luo first started studying the Divine Runic Arts when he reached the Divine Lord realm, so he has probably studied the Divine Runic Arts for around 70 to 80 years. Studying the Divine Runic Arts requires a tremendous amount of time, and you also need a ridiculously solid soul force as a support. Many martial artists first cultivate the martial path first before studying the Divine Runic Arts. Me and my little brother are also the same, that is why we are only Divine Runic Art apprentices right now. There is still a long road ahead of us and we will continue to primarily focus on cultivating. So that's how it is. Lin Ming finally understood. When a martial artist was young, that was the prime time in their life to cultivate martial arts. From their teenage years to when they were several dozen years old, martial artists were in a constant race against time. The higher their cultivation achievements were in their youth, the more life potential they could dig out in the future, meaning that their future achievements would also be greater. If they placed too much time and energy in learning the Divine Runic Arts, then the losses would simply outweigh the gains. 70-80 years to become a third-grade Divine Runic Master, that is also acceptable. Lin Ming was constantly calculating the time he needed to learn the Divine Runic Arts. If a Divine Runic Arts talent like Luo Yubai needed 70 to 80 years to become a third-grade Divine Runic Master, then if he could increase this speed by 100 times, Lin Ming could reach the same level in maybe 10 months. Of course, a third-grade Divine Runic Master was far from reaching Lin Ming's requirements. He needed to become a Divine Runic Grandmaster and also minor in alchemy. Only like this would he be able to refine the pills needed for the 9 stars of the Dao Palace. Tip, you can use left, right, and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Martial World. Chapter 1548 Broken Jade. Chapter 1548 Broken Jade. After entering the Divine Runic Masters Guild, the medicinal fragrance was much richer. If an ordinary pill were placed in the Divine Runic Masters Guild for a long time, then it would soak in the medicinal fragrance and become a medicinal pill. If a mortal were to breathe in this fragrance, then their mind would become sharper and they would become the #1 scholar of their country. If a martial artist lived here year-round, it would also be beneficial to their cultivation. The grounds of the Divine Runic Masters Guild, their walls, their stone tables and stone benches, and even their eating utensils were engraved with runes. These runes not only served decorative purposes, but they were themselves array formations that could do various things such as gathering origin energy or strengthening the use of tools. Miss Yu, I saw some people lining up outside the Divine Runic Masters Guild waiting for some test. Just what are they testing? Lin Ming asked as he followed behind Yu Liuking. It seems that the Divine Runic Masters Guild is looking to recruit guards. Those people have all come to apply. Yu Liuking casually said. Lin Ming was dumbfounded upon hearing this. Just for recruiting guards, so many people had come, and these people were all outstanding young elites. However, upon thinking about it further, this was also within reason. Not only was it easy to come into contact with great individuals within the Divine Runic Masters Guild, but one could also obtain high wages. Just the medicinal fragrance within the Divine Rune Pagoda would be greatly beneficial to their cultivation if they could inhale it daily. Lin Ming continued following Yu Liuking through a number of winding corridors until they reached a broad hall. Within this grand hall, there were several neatly arranged rows of blue stone counters. These counters all had various alchemy and inscription tools on them. Standing behind some of these counters were young martial artists. These martial artists wore robes and were clearly busying themselves with working at the counters. A few old men sat on the sidelines, judging their work while they sipped on some tea and also occasionally gave pointers. It was clear that they were guiding their apprentices. Sir Lin, take a look. The one in a black and white robe is a Divine Runic Master and the one in a blue and red robe is an alchemist. The badges on their chest represent their grade. The more stripes there are, the higher their grade is. In Divine Rune City, alchemists and Divine Runic Masters were separate. Although there were a massive number of alchemists in the Divine Runic Masters Guild, the reason that this organization was named by its Divine Runic Masters was because their status was higher than alchemists. Lin Ming watched with his own eyes as a disciple completed a Divine Runic symbol and then placed it on a rock. The Divine Runic symbol immediately melted into the rock, fusing with it. Then, this hard rock shimmered with a brilliant light. After the light died down, it still glowed with a golden light, because it had actually turned into gold. This was truly turning stone into gold. Turning stone into gold was an immortal skill that mortals dreamed of. However, this was a useless ability to martial artists, because to them, gold was no different from iron. But, if someone were to tell Lin Ming to turn stone into gold just by touching it, then that wouldn't be something he could do. Let alone Lin Ming, not even a great world king could do this. In order to accomplish this miracle, one needed to be at least an empire-ian. This was because turning stone into gold involved changing the structure of matter, something that was part of the heavenly Tao laws. In truth, changing the structure of matter was violating the heavenly Tao laws. Although it wasn't the same as rebelling against the heavens, it was similar. If one wasn't an empire-ian or hadn't crossed heavenly tribulation, then it was impossible to do this. But in front of Lin Ming, a simple divine runic art had accomplished this. This was because in the Asura Road, divine runic arts represented the heavenly Tao, the will of God. Because of this, people changed this skill from inscription technique to the divine runic arts. After witnessing a divine runic master turn stone into gold, Lin Ming saw another divine runic master place a divine runic symbol into a basin of water. This water became increasingly thick, and before long, it had turned into oil. Atat novel been atat. And, what startled Lin Ming the most was a middle-aged divine runic master with 3 stripes on his badge placing a divine runic symbol on a frog. This frog then transformed into a mouse. Although this wasn't particularly useful to a martial artist, this was actually an extraordinary ability. For a single divine runic symbol to turn stone into gold, turn water into oil, and even change the shape of a life form and turn a frog into a mouse, this was almost the same as the divine ability of creation. The legendary Asura Road is said to be created by the Asura Road Master. But, the title of the Asura Road Master is not a true divinity, but the creator. The Asura Sutra that he created is the cultivation method to control the power of divine creation and create an entire world. If one mastered the Asura Sutra, then it might really be possible to create an entirely new world. Unfortunately, I understand far too little about the Asura Sutra. Lin Ming sighed deeply. He was far too young, with less than 60 years of cultivation. There was a long road ahead of him. If one reached the highest levels of the divine runic arts, could one change grass into peak heavenly materials? Or change stones into 9 sun jades? If so, then to an 8th or 9th grade divine runic master, wealth has no meaning at all. Of course, Lin Ming was just thinking about this. He didn't doubt that wanting to transform something into top medicinal materials would require an absurdly high grade of divine runic symbol. It wouldn't be easy at all to draw up. As Lin Ming was thinking, he soon saw another divine runic master place a divine runic symbol onto a hoe. This hoe was an ordinary hoe used by mortal farmers on their farm. It was indeed stained with rust and time. But after this divine runic symbol was placed on it, the entire hoe shined with a divine light. Although its shape didn't change, the quality of this hoe had directly climbed up to a low-grade saint artifact. The rust fell off, revealing a pitch-black edge that shined with a cold light. Even the handle gained a strange elasticity that allowed one to bend it like a moon, and one could even use it to save strength and shatter a pillar of divine steel. In Lin Ming's eyes, this handle would make an excellent spear shaft. This is truly heaven-defying. As Lin Ming sighed with praise, he also understood that divine runic arts were limited to the Asura Road. Once one left the Asura Road, it would be impossible to use the divine runic arts because god runes did not exist outside of the Asura Road. The only exception would be if one could thoroughly pass the final test of the Asura Road and control the laws of the Asura Road for one's own use, instead of simply following them. Lin Ming could faintly feel that the Asura Road Master had in truth formed his own independent heavenly Dao, and although this heavenly Dao stood outside of the 33 heavenly Daos, it still stood on equal footing with them. To be able to create his own heavenly Dao laws, this sort of method was truly heart-shaking to hear. Without a doubt, after one's divine runic arts reached this level, even if there was a poor quality pill, if one were to place a high-grade divine runic symbol on it, it would become something far more profound. This was not something that the medicinal inscription symbols that Lin Ming learned before could hope to compare with. After passing through this hall, Lin Ming and the others arrived at a side hall of the Divine Runic Masters Guild. This side hall was considerably large, it was the trade area of the Divine Runic Masters Guild. This trade area was completely different from the square around Divine Rune Pagoda. In the Divine Rune Pagoda Square, there were all sorts of sounds, cries and bargaining noises, just like a busy mortal market fair. But here, everything was quiet. The stall vendors lazily sat in their chairs. They might have been meditating or resting, as if these stalls had nothing to do with them at all. These vendors were all Divine Runic Masters or alchemists of the Divine Runic Masters Guild. Lin Ming and Xiao Moxian approached a stall. The stall vendor reluctantly opened one eye to sweep over Lin Ming and Xiao Moxian, then, he returned to meditating as if he hadn't seen them at all. This was because to the stall vendor, Lin Ming and Xiao Moxian didn't resemble customers at all. They were as young as little babies, their cultivations weren't high, and they weren't Divine Runic Masters or alchemists, so what could they possibly be doing here except taking a look? This stall vendor simply couldn't be bothered with attending to these customers who were only interested in window shopping. What sort of service is this? Xiao Moxian said, a bit indignantly. Ever since coming to the Divine Runic Masters Guild she had been continuously ignored. First was that Luo Yubai who seemed to have his eyes on the top of his head. She wished that she could maliciously stomp on him as revenge. Now it was this old geezer, sitting there motionlessly like he was some almighty Buddha. How could Xiao Moxian be happy with this? Hey you, how do we buy these medicines? Xiao Moxian pointed towards a withered yellow root that looked like a radish and asked about this common-looking herb. She asked about this medicinal herb because she could feel a rich heaven and earth origin energy emanating from it. It clearly wasn't ordinary. The Divine Runic Master lazily opened an eye, glancing at Xiao Moxian from between the slits of his eyelids. He lightly said, your eyesight is all right, but you don't even know the name of this medicinal herb. You aren't a customer at all, but you're simply curious about all of this. If you're just going to waste my time, then don't bother disturbing me. After being exposed by the Divine Runic Master, Xiao Moxian squawked out loud, nearly choking on herself. Lin Ming smiled, saying, although we don't understand the Divine Runic Arts, buying good materials is always useful. I also intend to dabble in the Divine Runic Arts in the future, so I ask Senior to kindly inform us of the price. With Lin Ming's Divine Lord boundary cultivation, he was at the perfect time to begin learning the Divine Runic Arts. But to this old Divine Runic Master, Lin Ming clearly didn't have any chance of learning anything because he was a human. He looked at Lin Ming with an annoyed look, as if he didn't want Lin Ming to continue bothering him. Then, he directly listed off the names of several materials as well as the price of the medicinal herb. This time, Lin Ming was left dumbfounded. He had never heard of these materials before, and according to the old man, he simply didn't accept origin energy runes. Rather, he wanted to barter, the most primitive form of trade. Realizing this, Lin Ming suddenly became aware. These vendors all held extremely high positions and didn't lack 9 sun jades or origin energy runes. What they lacked were materials and rare god runes, or superior top-grade pill furnaces for alchemy, or even top-grade pens for drawing up divine runic symbols. Thus, these vendors were mostly interested in bartering. They had no interest in origin energy runes because there were things that couldn't be purchased with origin energy runes. Lin Ming was able to confirm that he couldn't afford anything here. He hadn't even heard of these materials before, so what was there to buy? Lin Ming had no choice but to withdraw. The Divine Runic Master sighed, giving off an expression that he had long expected this. Then, he closed his eyes and returned to his meditation. This caused Xiao Moxian to be even more disgruntled. Let's go. Lin Ming said. The reason he came to the Divine Runic Masters Guild was to see just what the Divine Runic Arts were. Now that he had accomplished his goal, he could leave. All that remained was to learn the Divine Runic Arts. However, just as Lin Ming was about to leave, he suddenly stopped where he was, no longer leaving. His eyes locked onto a table covered with random objects in front of the old Divine Runic Master. Among these random items was a common-looking piece of broken jade, but as Lin Ming saw this jade, he was shocked. Tip, you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Martial World. Chapter 1549 Buying Treasures. Chapter 1549 Buying Treasures. There were too many scattered items in front of the old Divine Runic Master's stall. It was like he was too lazy to sort these things out and let them pile up in a messy bunch. Among these random items was a common piece of broken jade that was hidden by some other things. If it weren't for Lin Ming's extraordinary eyesight and a faintly familiar aura that he felt from this broken jade, then he would never have noticed it at all. Lin Ming silently squatted down in front of the old Divine Runic Master's stall, quietly probing that broken jade. After a short period of time, he was able to confirm that he wasn't mistaken. Normally, someone old and well-taught like this old Divine Runic Master vendor would have a vast amount of experience and it should have been impossible for Lin Ming to find any hidden gems in his trove of random items. But, this broken jade was too special. Besides Lin Ming, there was no one else who would have sensed anything special about it. Although this broken jade was only an inch in size and was extremely fragmented, there were faint lines on its surface. These lines revealed an aura, one that was the exact same as the Emperor Jade that Lin Ming had obtained from the Wheel of Destiny. When Lin Ming first entered the Asura Road, he had obtained the Emperor Jade. By relying on it, he had been able to enter the great desolate god trove hidden in the depths of the God-Burying Ridge. In God-Burying Ridge, the Emperor Jade had allowed Lin Ming to repeatedly overcome danger after danger, saving his life countless times. Could the Asura Road Master have left more than one piece of Emperor Jade? Was there a pair, or even more than a pair? Lin Ming didn't know why this Emperor Jade was broken. This little piece wasn't even a quarter of the size of a complete Emperor Jade, and it was also missing the most essential lines of an Emperor Jade. This would make perceiving anything from it nearly impossible. This Divine Runic Master must have accidentally obtained this broken jade from somewhere, and although he could faintly feel that it was uncommon, he couldn't figure out just what it was. He likely thought it was only a fragment of an ancient top magic weapon, and thus he had brought it out to sell. Lin Ming began to leisurely look over every other item in the store to prevent the old Divine Runic Master from discovering his true purpose. At this time, the Divine Runic Master vendor opened his eyes, saying, "You aren't a Divine Runic Master and you also don't understand the materials that I have, and yet you still linger around here. Have you taken a fancy to my items? Or perhaps you think you found some treasure amongst my random goods that you would like to take from me?" As the old Divine Runic Master spoke these words, Lin Ming felt his heart chill. This old geezer, he was far too vigilant. However, Lin Ming's behavior really couldn't be explained. What others wanted, Lin Ming didn't have, and as for the items that were placed out, Lin Ming had no idea what they were. If he continued to wander around here and look about, then that simply couldn't be justified. Lin Ming's thoughts turned and he immediately responded, "Senior shouldn't say that. Although this junior is nothing but an amateur layman when it comes to the Divine Runic Arts and I also don't have any materials that senior wants, I have still decided to become a Divine Runic Master in the future. I will eventually need to understand what these things are, and there are always some things that I have which senior might need. For instance, God Runes. The God Runes in the Asura Road were obtained through completing missions. Lin Ming had many rare Blue Soul Runes as well as a few Zenith Black Runes with him. A Divine Runic Master's Divine Runic Arts needed rare God Runes. Only by combining these God Runes with inscription did that form the Divine Runic Arts. Lin Ming guessed that Divine Runic Masters were normally busy with their own matters every day, so they almost never had time to go out in the greater Asura Road and complete missions. Plus, in order to obtain rare God Runes they would trade for them here. This was why he thought of exchanging some treasures with God Runes. "You want to become a Divine Runic Master?" He, the Divine Runic Master vendor chuckled. Although hadn't done any evaluations, his meaning was obvious. In his opinion, a human wanting to become a Divine Runic Master was no different from a toad wanting to eat swan meat. However, the Divine Runic Master vendor was indeed interested in Lin Ming's God Runes. He asked, "What God Runes do you have? Let's take a look." Lin Ming didn't take out his God Runes just yet. If this vendor saw that he had so many rare God Runes then he might ask for a ridiculous price. Lin Ming said, "If I dare to speak like this, then I naturally have quite a few in my inventory." As Lin Ming finished speaking he continued looking at the random treasures. His original idea was to casually pick some items and then conveniently take the broken Emperor Jade too. However, he immediately rejected this after he thought of it. This was because besides the Emperor Jade fragment, the other items didn't need to be appraised at all. If he chose a random bunch of bargain items and then added on this strange Emperor Jade fragment once more, it would inevitably arouse the vendor's suspicions. It was clear that this vendor didn't understand just what the Emperor Jade fragment was, and Lin Ming lingering around here was suspicious to begin with. If he were to take the Emperor Jade fragment with a bunch of other things, then that would be far too suspicious. Thinking of this, Lin Ming directly took up the Emperor Jade fragment and then flipped it over a few times in his hand. He suddenly said to Xiao Moxian, Xiana, I remember you said that your uncle wanted to refine his life's magic tool, but he needed to fuse in the treasure spirit of an Empyrean spirit treasure. A complete Empyrean spirit treasure would be too luxurious, but using a fragment should be more than enough. Since your uncle's 103,000th grand birthday celebration is coming up, then how about I make a gift of this spirit treasure fragment? Lin Ming was simply making things up on the spot. Where did Xiao Moxian have an uncle that needed an Empyrean spirit treasure to refine his life's magic tool? But Xiao Moxian was a smart young woman. She immediately realized that Lin Ming wanted to hide his intentions of buying this broken jade and avoid the suspicion of the old man. Could this broken jade be a treasure? At novel bean at. Xiao Moxian felt this all a bit too unbelievable. But whether or not Lin Ming's judgment was correct, she wouldn't ruin his play anyways. Without revealing a puzzled expression, she slapped on the most helpless look that she could. With a thick embarrassment in her tone, she said, Sir Lin, don't you think that this gift is a bit too sad? My uncle's celebration will have people coming from all sides, and if you only take out a spirit treasure fragment there, don't you think it's a bit pitiful to take out? You should know that my uncle handles most decisions of my family. If he has a poor impression of you, then I'm afraid that our matters will be. Xiao Moxian immediately responded with her own play. Lin Ming was left a bit stunned. Wasn't her acting a bit too good? Hearing Xiao Moxian call this gift a bit sad, the divine runic master vendor's lips twitched. This was equal to saying that he was selling trash. Just what sort of noble status was a divine runic master? He had lived to his old age and had a great deal of face, and yet right now he was insulted by a little girl. How could he be happy about this at all? Do you want to buy it or not? The old divine runic master coldly coughed. Lin Ming quickly apologized. Senior has misunderstood the situation. This junior didn't mean it like that. I only meant to say that this magic weapon fragment has the lowest value out of all of Senior's goods, but even so, it would bleed out far too much wealth from me. May I ask just how much this magic weapon fragment is? Heck, you don't need to flatter me into forgetting. The old man sneered. He stared at Lin Ming and then said, 10 blue soul runes. Lin Ming's heart skipped a beat as he heard this. He knew the approximate cost of an Empyrean spirit treasure fragment as well as the cost of a blue soul rune. 10 blue soul god runes for this fragment was far too outrageous. Although Lin Ming could afford 10 blue soul runes, he still felt that this old vendor was cheating him. If he agreed, not only would he make himself seem suspicious, but this old man might not even sell it to him anymore. 10 blue soul runes. Are you joking with me? As a senior, should you really be trying to butcher a junior like this? The most I can offer you is 3. As Lin Ming spoke, he raised 3 fingers and 3 blue soul runes floated above his fingertips. Lin Ming had taken special care in choosing these 3 blue soul runes. Although their value wasn't too high, they were still quite rare among blue soul runes. They couldn't be bought with mere money. Lin Ming wanted to stir up this old divine runic master's interest. However, Lin Ming never thought that as soon as the old divine runic master saw these 3 runes, he would immediately grab back the Emperor Jade fragment. Lin Ming inwardly grimaced. Could this old man not be planning on selling to him anymore? If the old divine runic master didn't plan on selling to Lin Ming, then Lin Ming didn't have anything else he could do. He could only leave. Otherwise, if Lin Ming offered a higher price, the old man's suspicions would be even higher, finally only having the opposite effect. The old man flipped the broken jade in his hand several times, carefully probing it and using his sense to evaluate it. This process continued for an entire incense stick of time. This old man had already appraised this item many times before. In the Divine Runic Masters Guild, the Divine Runic Masters were generally on good terms with each other. When others evaluated this item, they also came up with a similar appraisal. This sort of magic weapon fragment was likely of the Empyrean Spirit Treasure rank. This wasn't too tempting to the old man. If it weren't for the strange lines that covered this piece of jade, he would have already dealt with it. An Empyrean Spirit Treasure wasn't priceless even if complete, it would be far lower in value than a transcendent divine might. This was because an Empyrean would at most be able to form a single transcendent divine might in their life, if at all. As for Empyrean Spirit Treasures, they would create several of them. An incomplete Empyrean Spirit Treasure was even less valuable. Its only use was, as Lin Ming had said, to draw out its artifact spirit and form one's own treasure. Finally, the old man handed the broken jade to Lin Ming. He coldly said, 3 blue soul runes, for you. Hearing these words, Lin Ming finally relaxed. This old fellow was cautious and stingy to the point that he could squeeze oil from sand. A junior had chosen one of his items and even given a good reason for doing so, yet he had actually taken it back to look over several times. 3 blue soul runes was a bit high for an Empyrean Spirit Treasure fragment, but it wasn't too outrageous. Lin Ming feared that the runes he took out weren't able to move the old Divine Runic Master. If so, he could only leave. Otherwise, the more he tried to barter, the more suspicious the old man would be. It seemed that Xiao Moxion's performance just now was a bit more effective than he thought. Lin Ming handed over the 3 blue soul runes and finally bought what he wanted. As for the old man, he was satisfied with the 3 blue soul runes Lin Ming had put forth. He had indeed needed them. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Martial World. Chapter 1550 Undying Medicine. Chapter 1550 Undying Medicine. In order to prevent any more problems occurring, after Lin Ming bought his item he took a few more circles around and then bid his farewells to Yu Liuqing and Yu Chaifan. Together with Xiao Moxian, he left the Divine Runic Masters Guild. Lin Ming, what is that thing you bought? Xiao Moxian couldn't help but ask Lin Ming with a sound transmission as soon as they left. Her curiosity had gotten the better of her. If I'm not wrong then this should be something left behind by the Asura Road Master. Lin Ming honestly replied. Xiao Moxian was startled upon hearing this. The Asura Road Master. In the Asura Road Master was the true divine god. Anything related to him, even if it was only a tiny fragment, was astoundingly valuable. No wonder Lin Ming had tried so hard to buy this piece of broken jade. What use does this have? I have no idea at present. But no matter what, we're headed back to Heaven's Secret for now. You want to return to Heaven's Secret? Xiao Moxian asked, surprised. They had just left from there not too long ago. What do you want to go to Heaven's Secret for? There's some information I need. This information is extremely important for me to learn the Divine Runic Arts. The Divine Runic Arts were broad and all-encompassing. In order to study them, one needed to invest a massive amount of time and energy while accumulating a tremendous amount of knowledge and experience. What Lin Ming lacked the most now was time. Even if he had the Asura Sutra supporting him, it was impossible to do all of this overnight, and if all of this took too much time then it was meaningless to Lin Ming. After several hours, Lin Ming arrived at Heaven's Secret once more. This time, Lin Ming had chosen to change his appearance. Although Heaven's Secret sold all sorts of information, what they wouldn't reveal was what sort of information their guests had inquired about. This was one of the most basic rules of an intelligence network, otherwise there would be no guest that would be able to ask for information in confidence, lest they be looked up by others. Even so, Lin Ming felt it was safe to change his appearance. After all, the information he was seeking now was highly sensitive. At novel bean at. Sir, what would you like to inquire about? The doorman asked Lin Ming at the entrance to Heaven's Secret. Divine Runic Masters. What rank? 5th rank and above. Then please go to the 5th floor. The doorman respectfully said. This was the same floor as last time. After reaching the 5th floor with Xiao Moxian, Lin Ming took up the wooden sign marked with people and then was led to the corresponding room. In this room, there was a blue-clothed old man waiting for Lin Ming. The old man sat in the back of the room, separated from guests by a hanging curtain. He spoke to Lin Ming through this curtain. What would you like to know? The old man's voice was hoarse and gritty, as if he were in the waning years of his life. I want information on Divine Runic Masters and Alchemists. I do not want any Divine Runic Masters from the Divine Runic Masters Guild. They must live outside of Divine Rune City and should preferably have strange and eccentric personalities. They need to be people who have committed all sorts of sinful and evil deeds. I need their location, their cultivation methods, their cultivation boundaries, an approximation of their strength, what influences support them, and all other related information. Moreover, the Divine Runic Masters should be at the 5th grade or above. At the very least they must be at the 4th grade. The blue-clothed old man was surprised as he listened to Lin Ming. The information you want is extremely detailed, so our price will be very high. This is also because if we betray the information of these individuals, our Heaven's Secret might offend them. Heaven's Secret was an intelligence network and thus they inevitably collected information on great influences and important figures. If they sold this information to others they were likely to offend them, especially if they sold this information to their enemies or other hostile groups. Thus, Heaven's Secret would be very careful with what sort of information they sold. If they couldn't offend the individual, then they would never sell the information no matter how high the price. As for those that they could offend, the price would be exorbitantly high. An intelligence network was involved in all aspects of the world. If their background wasn't deep enough and they aroused the anger of some people, it was possible that they would be dug up and eliminated. Information on Divine Runic Masters is sensitive to begin with. There are often many complex relationships behind these Divine Runic Masters. Luckily, you don't want any information about Divine Runic Masters that are a part of the Divine Runic Masters Guild, otherwise no matter how many Origin Energy runes you offered we still wouldn't sell it to you. If you want information on Divine Runic Masters that have been exiled outside of Divine Rune City, then I can actually provide some information to you. There are a few pieces of information I have which aren't too involved with the greater influences. Each piece of information will be charged according to the detail as well as the grade of the Divine Runic Master, and they will be around 500 million to 700 million Origin Energy runes each. As the blue-clothed old man said these words, even though Lin Ming had already been prepared for this, he still felt his heart drip blood. This was indeed ridiculously expensive. Although he was wealthy, during all his years in the Asura Road, he had never earned money, only spent it, and he had spent a great deal of it too. Lin Ming didn't have too many 9 sun jades left on him. Lin Ming took out a piece of white jade and poured his divine sense into it, further detailing his requests. He wanted to know their strength, cultivation, moral behavior, temperament, and so forth. He also only wanted those evil and demonic people. As for divine runic masters that were highly respected and noble characters, he didn't want them at all. After the blue-clothed old man looked through the white jade, he said, "There are a total of 3 individuals that match your request. The total price will be 1.6 billion. Millimeter." Lin Ming took a deep breath and fished out some 9 sun jades from his spatial ring. After he lined them up, he said, "Tell me everything." "All right." The blue-clothed old man wrote down 3 sections of information on a jade slip. Lin Ming took the jade slip and recorded all the information in his mind. Then, he and Xiao Moxian left Heaven's Secret. 100,000 miles southeast of Divine Rune City, there was a remote mountain. People rarely visited this mountain, and deep in a valley of it was a lake that stretched for 10 miles, named Star Lake. As night arrived each evening, Star Lake would be filled with the night winds. The reflection of starlight would shine down on the lake, making it seem like a stretch of liquid silver, beautiful to the eyes. On one side of Star Lake was an ancient castle. This castle was built with obsidian, and had already stood here for 100,000 years. A part of the castle extended into the lake, leaving a black reflection on the surface. Looking at this black reflection, one felt a sense of peace and quiet. However, no one imagined that such a beautiful and wondrous place was in truth the den of darkest evils. Within the castle, there was a completely sealed-off space. The floors were made of pale red tiles and the walls were dark grey. Pill furnaces and divine runic tables were scattered all about, making it seem messy and chaotic. On these stone tables and on the walls, there were black stains. These stains were left by dried up blood. In the center of this space, there was a row of metal frames, dozens of them all together. But, what was startling was that on every metal frame, there was a young girl tied up. These young girls were in rags and some were even naked. The oldest of them were in their 20s, and there were even those that were 16 to 17. The youngest among them looked to be around 11 to 12, with a few 13 to 14-year-olds placed throughout. Every girl was covered with scars. These scars were found on their necks, thighs, chests, stomachs, and wrists. There were knife wounds, scratches, and even bite marks. Some wounds were intentionally afflicted, and some seemed specifically designed to let out blood. After suffering for such a long time, all of these girls were in the depths of despair, their eyes without light, like dying embers. If it weren't for their faint heartbeat and breathing, one might even think that they were dead. Although they had been tortured into such states, one could still the beauty that hid behind their dirty faces and disheveled hair. It was clear that these were once proud beauties of different races. There were humans, monsters, demons, and even saints. In fact, not only were they beauties of different races, but there were those amongst them with relatively high levels of martial talent. Some had special physiques, variation bloodlines, or variation dantians. Some girls were martial artists. There were those at the Xiontian realm, and even some at the revolving core realm. But now, their cultivations had been sealed away, they were no different from ordinary mortal girls. If one were to send these girls to large influences, then although they might not have been peak geniuses, they should still have become inner court disciples. If one raised them with enough effort, then there were high chances that they would reach the Divine Lord realm in the future. But now, all of that was impossible. Their lives would be buried in the horrendous and despairing castle. Some of these people had been kidnapped, and some had been bought as slaves. Of them, most were mortals that had never cultivated before. They were simply unable to withstand the inhuman torture. Without a doubt, they would die from suffering in just several months. But those who cultivated had already been trapped in this castle for several years. After being tortured night and day for several years, the average person would have suffered mental collapse or died. But, the master of this castle was an alchemist, and with all sorts of miracle pills and medicines, wanting to die was nearly impossible. This castle master would even use dangerous pills to heighten the cultivation boundary of these girls, digging out their life potential and then stealing it away. What awaited them was a lifetime of endless suffering and pain. Only when their essence, energy and blood vitality was sucked dry, only when their youth and strength had faded, would they be abandoned and buried in the back gardens of the castle. Seemingly because of the presence of their skeletons, the flowers in the back gardens bloomed especially bright. At this time, the space barriers of this hidden space suddenly shook violently. A man's roar echoed out within it. Trash! Trash! Damn it all! Bang! With an explosive sound, something seemed to detonate. Stone tables were flipped over and pill furnaces were tossed away, bouncing all over. A pale man with greyish-white hair rushed in like a rabid beast. This man wore tattered robes and he looked to be middle-aged, but there was not a trace of blood on his face and a faint death aura percolated around his body. This meant that his life was nearing its end. I failed again. The life-lifting undying pill, just how many times have I failed? The man's eyes were blood red, seeming as if he were about to go crazy. He was a spiritus, but the faint soul glow that symbolized the soul race had already vanished. This was a sign that his fires of life had diminished and his life was nearing its end. He would have at most another 100 years to live. He dreamed to refine an endless life immortality pill. For this pill, he had refined for 10,000 years already. He thought that he would never be able to successfully complete the refining of this pill before he died. Thus in the last several hundred years, he had been refining the lower quality life-lifting undying pill. He wanted to lengthen his life, even if it were only by several hundred years. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Martial World. Chapter 1551 Sex Fiend Torch River. Chapter 1551 Sex Fiend Torch River. I am a 6th grade Divine Runic Master and 8th grade Alchemist. How could I fail here? The Spiritas man seemed to teeter on the edge of insanity. It's impossible for me to fail. It must be because the blood essence quality of you whores is insufficient. The man pulled on a girl's hair, causing her to scream out in pain and fear. Towards this scene, most of the other girls still had dead expressions on their faces, as if they didn't see anything at all. But there were some girls that hadn't been here long enough who trembled as they saw this, panic coloring their complexions. Here, besides being raped and having their essence energy stolen, this crazy Divine Runic Master would sometimes use their flesh and blood to refine pills. They had witnessed some of their companions being tossed alive into a pill furnace in order to refine life-lifting undying pills. To life forms with an intelligence of their own, death was an extremely terrifying matter. Upon approaching death, many people would turn crazy and lose all sense of reasoning. In just the mortal world alone, when some kings were on the verge of death, they would use the strength of their entire nation to find life-extending medicines. These kings would have alchemists take virgin boys and girls and use their flesh and blood for alchemy. Some kings even specifically raised 12 to 13-year-old virgin girls to take their menstrual blood every month to refine pills, and in order to guarantee the virgin purity of their menstrual blood, they would only allow them to eat berries and drink morning dew. In the martial world, this insanity could reach the limits. In particular, if an alchemist feared death, this would intensify everything he did. What a pity, what a pity. If I could capture a proud daughter of heaven who reached the divine transformation realm before her 60th cultivation year, and then refine her virgin blood essence into a pill, I would definitely be able to live on for another 100 more years. The Spiritas man spoke as if he had lost his soul, his gestures bizarre and ghostly. Many years ago, this Spiritas man had been an elder of the Divine Runic Masters Guild and also had a World King cultivation. As a 6th grade Divine Runic Master, 8th grade Alchemist, and even an elder of the Divine Runic Masters Guild, this Spiritas man was blessed with endless brilliant halos around him. There were countless influences that curried his favor, and even sect leaders of great World King influences had to treat him with politeness and respect. As for his disciples and followers in the Divine Runic Masters Guild, there was no need to mention them, they wouldn't even dare disobey him in the least. His prestige had been as high as the sun and he lived a life where he was the center of countless stars. There were countless people that respected and admired him, and there were even many female Divine Runic Arts apprentices that willingly offered themselves to him for a higher status, allowing him to do whatever he wished to them. After tasting these young girls, the Spiritas man began to seduce them on his own initiative, bringing in many young girls as his toys. He had held the post of elder for tens of thousands of years and countless women had been ruined and deceived by him. As for the disciples he received, they tended to be women, and many of these disciples also had to simultaneously serve as his living furnaces. Towards this Spiritas man who was obsessed with obscene desires, even immortals couldn't compare to the lavish lifestyle he lived. He wasn't satisfied with his World King cultivation and he wasn't satisfied with being an ordinary elder of the Divine Runic Masters Guild. He wanted to become a Red Robe Elder and he wanted to become a great World King. He used all methods at his disposal to grab more resources and take advantages of anyone he could. Time and time again he formed deep grudges with others within the Divine Runic Masters Guild, and with his continued violating of young female apprentices, he was finally impeached by the Council of Red Robe Elders and was removed from his post of elder. This was something he remembered and something he bore a deep grudge towards. During a trip into a dangerous mystic realm, he tried to wrest away sole possession of a miracle medicine while also killing the Divine Runic Master Elder who had proposed to impeach him. But in the end he was defeated. Not only did he fail to obtain the miracle medicine but he was even beaten to the ground and severely wounded. Afterwards, he was expelled from the Divine Runic Masters Guild. Some people wanted to finish him off and cut off the disease at the roots. He fled to the open sea, living a life of seclusion for tens of thousands of years. It was only when his archenemy died during an exploratory trip into a mystic realm did he show himself again. But when he reappeared, his lifespan was nearing its end. Not just that, but in the past when he was injured in the mystic realm he had also wounded his divine soul, causing his lifespan to be drastically reduced. During these past years, he had done everything at his disposal to refine life-extending pills and pills to restore his divine soul. But, because the foundation of his life force was mostly destroyed, every effort he made was nearly useless to begin with. As his day of death approached closer and closer, he had fallen into a state of madness. He was too obsessed with his previous life of endless glory and joys and wasn't able to endure the loneliness and desolation until his end. He bought a large number of young women, venting his rage on their bodies and using their blood essence to refine pills. Finally, he built his evil castle of sin on the shores of Star Lake. Because his divine sense had been damaged and he had thrown his entire being into refining life-extending pills, he had no intention or desire to refine other pills. Thus, to many great influences he had lost all value, with none of them bothering with him. Because of this, he could only steal away a limited number of resources. Wanting to obtain the proud daughter of heaven that he needed was impossible. Thus, of the young girls in Castle, most of them were simply mortal women with extremely high levels of martial talent. Bang! This nearly crazed spirit-ass man flipped over a stone table and then threw himself onto a young 16-year-old girl. This young girl only had a pulse condensation cultivation. She had been born in the Asura Road and had once been the core disciple of a tiny sect. This sect was far too small, one could say that it was situated between the martial world and the mortal world. In her sect, this young girl had been a proud daughter of heaven, admired by countless young disciples. At a novel being at. But in a single night, her entire sect was exterminated. All beauties, all young women with any level of talent, were rolled up in a black wind and brought to this hellish castle. The one who destroyed her sect was this spirit-ass man. To her, his world king cultivation was an incomprehensible existence. This fiend didn't immediately rape these women. Rather, he used their virgin blood to refine pills, but unfortunately for him, his efforts failed again and again. This caused him to become even more insane. As he threw himself onto this young 16-year-old girl, he ripped away the remnants of her tattered clothes. In that moment, the young girl was left entirely naked. Her face was pale and she pitifully screamed out. But, this scream seemed to stimulate the spirit-ass man, causing his eyes to light up with a blood-red color. These last years had been endless pain to him, and only by making others feel this pain was he able to be satisfied. He licked his lips, demonically grinning as he said, "Your whorish blood is too low quality, causing me to fail in refining my undying pills. Since that's the case, keeping your virgin body around any longer is useless. I will suck dry the little primordial yin that you have. As the spirit ass man cackled, he bit down on her pale shoulder, greedily sucking up her blood. What he was doing was not just drinking her blood but also absorbing her blood essence, using it to restore his declining fires of life. The young girl crazily struggled, but the more she struggled the more it seemed to arouse this bestial demon. His pupils had gone white and his entire body was excited. He tore off his own clothes, pressing himself onto her. But, just when he was about to thrust into her body, he stiffened and his enlarged pupils rapidly contracted. In that instant just now, he had felt a sense sweep through this sealed-off space, and soon afterwards, a deep killing intent had locked onto him. Without thinking, he threw himself forwards. Bang! With a terrifying explosion of energy, a spear light pierced through the void like a 100,000-foot rainbow. Under this unstoppable divine light, the space barrier that sealed off this area was torn apart like paper. Not just that, but half of the obsidian castle immediately collapsed. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Stones tumbled as walls came falling down all around. The spirit-ass man's hideout was destroyed. A young man and woman floated in the air. The man grasped a spear, his eyes shimmering with killing intent. He pointed his spear right towards the spirit-ass man's head. You are sex fiend divine runic master Torch River. Lin Ming's voice dripped with murder as he glared at this spirit-ass man. Lin Ming's request towards Heaven's secret was that he wanted a 5th grade or above divine runic master who had an ordinary world king cultivation or below, who had no influences, or only weak influences behind them, and did all sorts of evil and sinful deeds. The information of the first divine runic master that Heaven's secret had given to him was that of this sex fiend Torch River. In his life he had raped countless women and he had developed a grotesquely infamous reputation within the divine runic masters guild. Finally, he had been banished by them. Lin Ming never imagined that this Torch River would go so mad as he neared the end of his life. During these past years, it was unknown how many young girls had died beneath his hands. Not even dying 10,000 times would make up for his sins. Near Lin Ming, Xiao Moxian tightly clenched her jaw. She had borne witness to everything that had happened. To see other women harmed like this, her rage had already reached its limits. Lin Ming, do not kill him. Leave him a sliver of life. I want him to experience a life that is worse than death. Tip, you can use left, right, and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Martial World. Chapter 1552 Divine Runic Master Shortcut. Chapter 1552 Divine Runic Master Shortcut. Who are you? To be ambushed just as he was about to rape someone, Torch River was burning with rage. His eyes were blood red, as if he wanted to devour Lin Ming and Xiao Moxian. But at this time, he noticed Lin Ming and Xiao Moxian's cultivations. They were only at the Divine Lord realm. Were they hiding their cultivation? No, that wasn't right, they were extraordinary young elites. Torch River had raped countless women in his life, and he usually only preyed on young girls. Thus, he was very sensitive to the life auras that surrounded young girls so he could confirm that Xiao Moxian wasn't very old. So young, and yet they had reached the Divine Lord realm. Just how had they cultivated? This discovery caused Torch River's eyes to shine brilliantly. A variation bloodline. She must possess a variation bloodline. A proud daughter of heaven, and she also has a variation bloodline. If I can use her blood as medicine and eat her up every day, then perhaps I really might be able to heal the wound to my divine soul. I will be able to live for thousands more years and complete my immortality pill. Torch River suddenly cackled. The heavens haven't abandoned me, they haven't abandoned me. What I lack is a proud daughter of heaven for my alchemy, and yet you have delivered yourself right to my door. Good. Very good. You will become my living furnace. We shall dual cultivate every day and I will bring you to paradise. As Torch River spoke, he lewdly stared at Xiao Moxian. This caused Xiao Moxian to nearly burst apart with rage. Lin Ming, dig out his eyes, slice out his tongue, and cripple his cultivation. I want to slice off his flesh and slowly torture him for 100 years, 1,000 years with every slice. Atat novel bean atat. Xiao Moxian came from a demon and monster bloodline to begin with. She was no blindly puerile and benevolent person. How could she allow herself to be insulted in such a way? Ha ha, if I haven't misunderstood, then you are only two martial artists at the Divine Lord realm. Your talent is a bit better than those of your generation, and yet you think you can kill me. You are insane. Even though my cultivation boundary has dropped, I am still a half-step world king. Catching you two is the same as catching 2 chickens. Torch River raved. He turned to Lin Ming and chortled again and again. Is this your little lover boy? Very well, then I shall use him for my alchemy right in front of you. Before Torch River finished speaking, his complexion suddenly changed. He could feel a vast and deep killing intent cover him. Then, the surrounding world changed. The world fell away, the stars vanished, and everything was isolated from him. He was completely trapped in a sealed-off space. Force field. Torch River immediately realized that this black-clothed youth had surrounded him with a force field. For such a genius, it wasn't a surprise if they had a force field. But, what astonished Torch River was that this force field formed an incomparably stable space, far surpassing the limits of any Divine Lord realm martial artist. There were even many holy lords who couldn't compare to this. Interesting, such talent even causes me to be more inspired to turn you into a pill. Torch River said, brilliantly staring at Lin Ming. Lin Ming coldly sneered. The information that Heaven's Secret gave me said that you have already fallen to the brink of madness, but now it seems that not only are you mad but you are also stupid. Your cultivation has fallen to a half-step world king, and with your fires of life nearly extinguished, even among half-step world kings you are the weakest. A talented late holy lord martial artist would already be able to brutally murder you, and yet you continue to dream on. Now die. As Lin Ming spoke, he hurtled himself forwards. Although his speed wasn't fast, his figure was as calm and stable as a mountain. 9 stars of the Dao Palace, Purple Temple Dao Palace. Lin Ming revolved his strength to the limit and smashed his spear down at Torch River. Because the 9 stars of the Dao Palace had been lost for far too long a time, and in addition to the changes that occurred in the Heavenly Dao laws, it had become extremely difficult to practice. But, this difficulty meant that it had become even stronger than before. Although there was no text that stated how the different levels of the 9 stars of the Dao Palace corresponded to the different ranks in the essence gathering system, Lin Ming could approximately confirm that opening a single star in the 9 stars of the Dao Palace far surpassed the early Divine Lord realm of the essence gathering system. In other words, although Lin Ming appeared to be an early Divine Lord, the truth was that when he combined the cultivation of his body transformation and essence gathering systems, he already far surpassed that. Torch River naturally couldn't understand Lin Ming's 9 stars the Dao Palace. He simply grinned, saying, since you want to die, allow me to help you along. Torch River took out a deep red sword from his spatial ring and then slashed out at Lin Ming. He wanted to crush Lin Ming's spear light and cut apart Lin Ming's body at the same time. However, just when his sword light came into contact with the Phoenix Blood Spear, Torch River's smile froze. The spear light he thought he could easily tear apart actually contained a horrifying strength beyond description. It was like this spear light was formed from heavy stars, able to collapse space and cut through galaxies. Catcher. With an explosive sound, Torch River's sword light shattered. The red spear thrust towards Torch River's chest. This spear had locked down Torch River and locked down the space around him. It was impossible to dodge. Even Torch River's blood vitality rebelled, as if it wanted to break free from his body. What? Seeing this spear light rush towards him, Torch River immediately paled. He thought that killing a junior like Lin Ming would be as easy as turning his hand. He never imagined that this would be the result. This youth's strength was powerful beyond understanding. Although this spear hadn't pierced him yet, what he knew was that even if he didn't die, this spear strike would still severely wound him and cause him to lose all combat strength. In this life or death moment, Torch River punched his own chest and spat out a mouthful of blood essence. This blood essence formed a mysterious symbol in the air. At the same time, Torch River crawled out 2 divine runic symbols from his spatial ring. He thrust them outwards, causing them to burn in the air. After these 2 divine runic symbols burned, they turned into a protective barrier that received Lin Ming's spear strike. Catcher. With an explosive sound, Lin Ming's Phoenix Blood Spear smashed into this translucent barrier. In a brief moment, the barrier exploded and the spear continued thrusting ahead, driving into the blood symbol that Torch River spat out. And at this time, Lin Ming finally felt a tremendous existence. The Phoenix Blood Spear suddenly slowed down, startling Lin Ming. He had used an arcane technique to strengthen himself, causing the might of this strike to reach the power of 5 dragons, and yet he hadn't been able to kill this Torch River who had fallen in cultivation boundary and had nearly lost all his blood vitality. Without a doubt, this was the work of the divine runic arts. Torch River had thrown out 2 divine runic symbols to lessen Lin Ming's spear potential and had then used a divine runic symbol formed from his own blood to resist Lin Ming's all-out strike. The divine runic arts could be used for more than assisting in alchemy, they could be used in combat. However, relying on this alone was not enough to change Torch River's fate. As the Phoenix Blood Spear was blocked by the blood symbol, Lin Ming's thoughts moved and a shadow rushed out from his inner world, hurtling towards Torch River. This was Lin Ming's Essence Spirit Embryo Avatar. It dwelled in Lin Ming's inner world and could rush out at any time to fight. After absorbing Tian Mingzi and the others' blood energy, the Essence Spirit Embryo Stone had broken through yet another boundary. In terms of mortal bodily strength, it far surpassed Lin Ming. CA. The Essence Spirit Embryo Stone thrust a spear towards Torch River, aiming to take his head. Ah! Torch River cried out in alarm, scared out of his mind. A single Lin Ming was already as terrifying as a life-reaping ghost. Only by sacrificing a great portion of his remaining life was he able to form this divine runic symbol of blood to barely resist the attack, and now another Lin Ming had appeared. Peng. With a cracking sound, Torch River's protective energy was unable to withstand the terrifying strength of the Essence Spirit Embryo Stone. In just a moment, Torch River's defenses collapsed and the Avatar's spear pierced through his chest. The long spear penetrated through Torch River's body. In front of the horrifying strength of the Essence Spirit Embryo Stone, the frail mortal body of a Spiritas was no different than paper. A massive amount of flesh and bones were twisted by this dreadful strength. Torch River's body was pierced through like a water bag, blood leaking out from all over him. How is this possible? Torch River's eyes filled with despair and disbelief. He had been easily defeated by a mere Divine Lord Junior and would die here. How could he accept such a ridiculous result? Pulse-cutting palm. Lin Ming smashed his hand into Torch River's chest. A savage and wild true essence rushed through Torch River's body, tearing apart every single meridian within him and severing the power of his blood vitality. In that moment, Torch River's body fell down from the air like a ragdoll. In a strange coincidence, he fell into the sealed space where the young girls were imprisoned. Puff. As the crippled Torch River plopped to the floor, his blood splashed out. The young girls who were imprisoned stared helplessly on. This unbelievably powerful Torch River had fallen to the ground like a dead dog, leaving all of them stunned. Was this a dream? Torch River still had a single breath of life remaining. Lin Ming had intentionally kept Torch River alive, because the shortcut for him to become a divine runic master was in Torch River's body. Tip, you can use left, right, and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters.
Are you strong enough to survive the trials? It cannot be done. Not enough spirit. I must wait longer. I need healing. The gods strike through me. I must wait longer.
Martial World. Chapter 1553 Refine the Soul. Chapter 1553 Refine the Soul. These girls that had been tortured by Torch River over so many years had already anticipated that they would die here. They had lost themselves to despair long ago and there was nothing left that could stir anything in their hearts. But at this moment, they saw that cruel and godlike Torch River fall onto the floor in a completely inhuman mess, on the verge of death. Then, a faint spark of hope ignited in their stunned eyes. After being beneath the agonizing abuse of Torch River for so many years, even if they saw him about to die, they still couldn't believe it. They were afraid that this was all a dream. At this time, Lin Ming floated down with his long spear in hand. Seeing Lin Ming descend like a god from heaven, the young girls were left in a daze. You're free. Lin Ming clicked his fingers and several true essence arrows shot forth, cutting the chains that shackled these young girls. Even the energy seals within their bodies were lifted. The moment that their shackles were cut, because many of the girls were weak and their muscles had atrophied, they fell onto the floor. The pain from this fall finally made them believe that this scene in front of them was real and not a dream. As they felt the rough ground, they also felt the freedom that they hadn't had for such a long time. Their bodies shivered. It wasn't known who started crying out first, but the girls couldn't help but weep one after another. They didn't know who this young man was, But in their hearts, this young man was their god and their savior. Even if they had to take care of him for their entire lives, they were willing to do so. Even if this youth wanted them all to die here, they would still comply without blinking. This was because when they were imprisoned by Torch River, they didn't even have the ability to commit suicide. They had lived a life worse than death. Looking at these young girls, Lin Ming sighed in pity for them, lamenting their fates. Many of them had a decent talent for cultivating martial arts, but their lives were mostly destroyed. Lin Ming flicked his fingers again and dozens of pills flew into the hands of these young girls. Lin Ming had given them miracle pills to make up for their lost blood vitality and to wash their marrow. These young girls were abused by Torch River and their blood vitality had been mostly sucked dry. Each of them had a pale white face and their energy was lacking. If they wanted to continue cultivating martial arts in this sort of condition, it would be impossibly difficult to do so. Normally, the lower cultivation a martial artist was, the worse their bloodline was, the easier it was to make up for lost blood vitality. The higher one's cultivation was, the greater one's bloodline, and the more one's talent defied the heavens, then the more difficult it would be to make up for lost blood vitality. But as for martial artists with low cultivation, although it was relatively easy to make up for lost blood vitality, they were simply far too weak to find the necessary blood tonics and pills to do so. Thus, for a martial artist at a low cultivation to make up for lost blood vitality was extremely difficult. For these young girls, it was simply impossible. However, this was a simple task for Lin Ming. To him, these pills weren't precious at all, but to these starry-eyed girls, these were unrivaled miracle medicines. Most of these young girls were common mortals. Even if they were to walk down the road of martial arts, they would only be able to reach the Pulse Condensation, Hushan, or Xiontian realms. To them a heaven-opening pill would be a priceless treasure, much less these miracle pills that Lin Ming handed out. Take these. These are all pills with moderate properties. Even though your bodies are weak, there won't be any side effects. Lin Ming gently said. As these girls held the miracle pills in their hands, their fingers began to shiver. Although they didn't know what grade these pills were, they could approximate their value from the rich medicinal fragrance wafting off them. Because of this, there were some girls that held the pills tightly in their hands, not willing to swallow them. Lin Ming sighed again as he saw this. This was the life of low-level, mortal martial artists. To a high-level martial artist, things that they casually tossed to the side of the road were incomparably precious treasures to these low-level martial artists. Lin Ming waved his hand once more and shot out some more pills. This time, the pills were thrust right into these girls' mouths. Rest well. You all may leave whenever you wish, or you may also stay here. 3 days from now, I will bring you to the nearest mortal city. I suggest that you wait, because the nearest mortal city is 10,000 miles away. Here is something to tide you over for the next few days. Lin Ming tossed out a bottle of fasting pills. This was the limit to which he could help these young girls. Their future days and the paths they chose to take would rely on themselves. After thinking some more, he said, you all possess talent to cultivate the martial arts. In the future, if you can walk far down that road, then perhaps the bitter and painful experiences of your youths might not be a bad thing. As Lin Ming finished speaking, he no longer delayed. He picked up the nearly dead Torch River and flew away. Left behind, the many young girls watched Lin Ming's fading back, their eyes lost in thought. The fragrance of the medicinal pills was still in their mouths, and the warm medicinal efficacy nourished their bodies, soothing their pain. In their lives, this was probably the happiest moment they had experienced. Sometimes, setbacks and frustrations weren't bad. These experiences could allow a person to mature at the fastest speed possible. If a person grew up without experiencing any problems, then it was hard to temper their personality and will. Xiao Moxian was similar, only in the 9 years within Tragic Death Valley had she matured in mind. Lin Ming brought the near-dead Torch River and went to the deepest depths of Star Lake. Here, he summoned Primordia's heavenly palace and entered it along with Xiao Moxian. Lin Ming, what do you plan on doing? Xiao Moxian was confused. Why would Lin Ming spend so much money to purchase information on divine runic masters from Heaven's Secret? Moreover, he had especially chosen evil and sinful divine runic masters. Could it be that he wanted to save the common people and eliminate future scourges? However, no matter what was said, they had indeed performed a good deed today. You'll know in a bit. This is the first time I've tried this, so I don't know whether or not it will succeed. Lin Ming took a deep breath. He stretched out his right hand and then a cloud of darkness began to condense over his palm. In another several breaths of time, within this halo of black light, a dark grey cube slowly appeared, exuding a deep and mystical aura. This was the magic cube. After Lin Ming took out the magic cube, the dying and despairing Torch River suddenly twitched like he had been bitten by a snake. His body immediately stiffened. He stared at the magic cube with wide eyes that were filled with utter panic. What is this? His voice shivered and fear discolored his face. Torch River was a spiritas. Within their bodies, the soul was the most important and integral part of them. Thus, he was extremely sensitive to this divine soul artifact, the magic cube. The saints refined their bodies, humans refined their energy, and the spiritas refined their souls. In a sense, the magic cube was the greatest and most precious treasure to the entire soul race, but at the same time, it was their supreme nemesis. This was because the magic cube was able to directly pull out a person's soul from their body and swallow it. Now that Torch River was in front of the magic cube, he was in that exact situation. He felt a terrifying force latch onto his body, faintly trying to pull out his soul. This strength left one drowning in helplessness, filled with fear. Torch River had originally been on the verge of collapse. His life was at its end, and with his cultivation being crippled by Lin Ming, there was nothing in his heart but anguish. But now that he faced the magic cube, another emotion overcame all else. This feeling was fear. In front of the magic cube, he felt as if he was being thrust into the deepest pit of hell, forever unable to reincarnate. Torch River struggled to retreat, leaving a trail of blood on the ground. For a spiritas to see the magic cube was like a mouse seeing a cat, a frog seeing a snake. This was an instinctual, inborn suppression. However, he had been locked onto by a strength and was left unable to struggle at all. He could only watch helplessly as the magic cube came closer and closer. This feeling was truly blood-curdling. You, what are you trying to do? I am going to refine your soul. Lin Ming smiled. But at this moment, his smile was extremely fierce. This is a divine tool that can refine souls. Its name is the Divine Crystal Magic Cube. You might have heard of it before or you might not have, but none of that matters, because you will soon feel its strength. You, what do you want to know? I will tell you anything you want, do not swallow my soul. Torch River was paler than white, his voice trembling the entire time. I'm sorry. The things I want to know are not things you can tell me. Lin Ming fiendishly grinned. Then, he poured his origin energy into the magic cube. The magic cube began to spin, sucking up all of the nearby divine soul energy. With the magic cube as the center, a black vortex appeared, seeming as if it could swallow the world. Ah! Torch River issued a heart-piercing scream. His body was twisted apart in this vortex and crushed to pieces. A deep blue divine soul was forcefully torn out from his ruined body before being sucked into the magic cube. No. Torch River's last cry seemed to stretch to infinity within this vortex, completed distorted. After that came pain, a pain that couldn't be described. A terrifying energy struck his soul form, and forcefully tore away his spirit mark. The souls of the spiritas were strong to begin with and their spirit marks were extremely deep. For their spirit mark to be torn out, the pain was excruciating beyond compare. Torch River felt as if time had slowed down to a crawl. Each breath of time seemed to last as long as a year. This endless and inexhaustible pain made him want to die, but he simply didn't possess the ability to kill himself. Torch River cried out again and again. Lin Ming was able to extinguish his soul from the start, but he didn't do so. Instead, he slowly grinded away Torch River's spirit mark. Towards this scumbag divine runic master who had caused so much suffering, only this sort of fate could slightly make up for all his sins. A person's soul was composed of pure memories and their spirit mark. This was a person's characteristic of life. If they lost either half, then the person would lose all sense of self. A person's spirit mark was like endless tiny filaments that thoroughly penetrated into every nook and cranny of a person's soul. Wanting to completely erase them without damaging the memories was impossible. But, the magic cube could actually do this. It had the ability to pull out these tiny, imperceptible threads. At novel being at. And as this ability was reflected on Torch River's body, it was more painful than being slowly flayed alive. Lin Ming slowly and carefully removed Torch River's spirit mark from his memories. This was also because Lin Ming had never used the magic cube in this manner before. It was his first time using the magic cube to produce memory fragments on his own initiative. In order to maintain the full body of Torch River's memories, Lin Ming used a full day and night to complete this laborious work. And as he was nearing the end, Torch River's soul had already dimmed down to nothing but an ember. His consciousness had been slowly tortured and destroyed by Lin Ming. Tip, you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Martial World. Chapter 1554 Heavenly Extreme Bliss. Chapter 1554 Heavenly Extreme Bliss. This day and night of pain was simply indescribable. Even Xiao Moxian, who swore she would cut Torch River to pieces, still felt her heart skip a beat as she saw his fate. The echoes of pain that transmitted from Torch River's soul were far too brutal and agonizing. It was hard to imagine just what he had experienced in this day. Finished, Lin Ming let out a long sigh of relief. He looked towards the complete ownerless memory fragment that floated within the magic cube and a happy expression crossed his lips. He had spent a great sum of money at Heaven's Secret to purchase information and then had cut down Torch River with all of his strength. Everything he did was for this ownerless and complete memory fragment, the memories of a divine runic master. Of the three divine tools, the divine magic cube, Grand Mist Spirit Bead, and that secretive and mysterious purple card, each one was the highest level of treasures. For the purple card, Lin Ming had no idea what its function was. But as for the magic cube and Grand Mist Spirit Bead, he had more or less dug out their secrets. Of the Grand Mist Spirit Bead and the magic cube, one was focused on the body and the other on the soul. The Grand Mist Spirit Bead could forcefully wrest away and swallow the blood vitality of all life. Moreover, it possessed the ability to condense all of this blood vitality into Grand Mist Spirit Bead essence. The effects of the Grand Mist Spirit Bead essence even surpassed a transcendent divine pill that was refined by an Empire Eon. When Lin Ming broke through the 9 stars of the Dao Palace, if he didn't have the help of the Grand Mist Spirit Bead essence, then even if he had the strength from the Essence Spirit Embryo Stone and Xiao Moxion's primordial Yin blood, it still wouldn't have been enough for him to achieve his breakthrough. The reason that the good fortune Saint Sun had the strength to suppress an ordinary world king with his peak divine lord realm cultivation was all because of the heaven-defying support of the Grand Mist Spirit Bead. In a sense, the Grand Mist Spirit Bead suited the Saint race far more than any other race. If a human were to obtain the Grand Mist Spirit Bead, then the use of it would be extremely minor for them. This was because the road of the 9 stars of the Dao Palace had been blocked. In the past, when Empire Eon Primordius obtained the Grand Mist Spirit Bead, his essence gathering system cultivation had already reached the World King boundary. But he hadn't started body transformation yet at all, he had started everything from zero. Not only was this road of martial arts one that defied the heavens, but Empire Eon Primordius had also missed the best opportunity for him to cultivate body transformation. The difficulty of the road he took afterwards could be imagined. Even so, Empire Eon Primordius had finally relied on the heaven-defying effects of the Grand Mist Spirit Bead and his own prodigious talent to break into the 9 stars of the Dao Palace. But Empire Eon Primordius hadn't opened too many Dao Palaces. At that time, his essence-gathering system cultivation was the extreme Empire Eon realm, but his 9 stars of the Dao Palace had only opened 4 or 5 palaces. His body transformation cultivation was far inferior to his essence-gathering cultivation, and his body transformation technique only had a limited ability to enhance his combat strength. In comparison, Lin Ming had a Divine Lord realm cultivation and had opened a single star of the 9 stars of the Dao Palace. Currently, his body transformation cultivation was higher than his essence-gathering system cultivation. It was similar to giving a child a well-crafted and accurate crossbow, making that child's lethal killing ability to rise to an all-new level. Even a strong and robust man could still be severely wounded or shot dead by an accurate arrow. Therefore, Lin Ming was able to cross 2 large boundaries in the essence-gathering system and contend with an ordinary world king. As for the magic cube, its abilities seemed to surpass even those of the Grand Mist Spirit Bead. It was able to ignore the protection of the flesh and directly exterminate an enemy's soul. But the true strength of the magic cube wasn't its ability to directly extinguish a person's soul and increase Lin Ming's combat strength. Rather, the true strength of the magic cube lay in its ability to cleanse a person's soul of its spirit mark, turning it into pure memories that could be freely absorbed without needing to worry that one would fall into madness. This heaven-defying effect was perfectly suited for plundering the cultivation methods of others. The cultivation methods of the martial world couldn't be passed on orally but had to be passed on through cultivation method jade slips. This was because cultivation method jade slips were far too complex and couldn't be fully explained in words alone. However, with the magic cube, Lin Ming was able to completely accept and inherit any martial artist's cultivation methods. This even included their attainments and experiences in those cultivation methods. Thus, Lin Ming could cultivate at an astronomical speed. When combined with his superior perception, the speed of his progress could only be described as rising 10,000 miles in a single day. Besides cultivation methods, almost everything else was applicable. This included divine runic arts, alchemy, array formations, refining technique, many other skills. Not only could he inherit all of their knowledge, but he could inherit all of their experience. And what Lin Ming needed to do was to constantly practice, thoroughly mastering this knowledge and reviewing these experiences, fusing those memories into his body until they became instinctual. This method of studying and speed of learning was simply mind-boggling, truly heaven-defying. The divine runic arts that took others dozens of years to learn would only take Lin Ming several months of practice. It could be said that when Lin Ming had reached the divine lord boundary and gained the ability to activate the magic cube, he had silently undergone a dreadful transformation, one that no one knew about. As Lin Ming grew stronger, he would be able to kill stronger masters and swallow their memories. And the more memories Lin Ming swallowed, the faster his cultivation would rise and the stronger he would become. As long as he had enough time, Lin Ming's strength would grow like a snowball rolling down a snowy mountain, rapidly growing. He would eventually become a perfectly versatile genius, skilled in all aspects. Thus, although the Grand Mist Spirit Bead was also a priceless treasure to Lin Ming, during his youth, the use of the Grand Mist Spirit Bead was far inferior to the help of the magic cube. From what he knew, the Grand Mist Spirit Bead focused on the mortal body and was able to produce endless medicines that surpassed the rank of transcendent divine pills. But transcendent divine pills were still something that Lin Ming could find if he went searching for lucky chances, wandering through danger zones, or he might even be able to purchase them. However, soul fragments from the magic cube were different. This would save a massive amount of cultivation time for Lin Ming, and what Lin Ming needed the most right now was time. Lin Ming closed his eyes in meditation, restoring his divine soul to its peak state. Then, he began to swallow Torch River's ownerless soul. These were the complete memories of an ordinary world king. The amount of information stored within it reached unimaginable levels. When Lin Ming was in the lower realms, he had only absorbed small soul fragments. Moreover, the past masters of these soul fragments didn't surpass holy lords before they had died. Even so, to the Lin Ming of that time, these soul fragments placed a tremendous burden on his divine soul. Swallowing these ownerless memories was like cutting open his head and stuffing in a massive amount of information. Because there was too much information and it was far too complex and diverse, Lin Ming had felt as if his head would explode. This wasn't something that the average person was able to withstand. Fortunately, during Lin Ming's 9 years in Tragic Death Valley, he had cultivated the Divine Mist Heart mantra and his soul force was no longer comparable to how it was in the past. Although abruptly absorbing the memories of an ordinary world king was extremely difficult, it wasn't to the degree where it would instantly shatter his spiritual sea. It had to be known that Torch River had lived for nearly 1,000,000 years. Moreover, a world king had an extremely sharp memory and they were able to memorize things very clearly and in much detail. As these memories accumulated over time, the total quantity of them was simply unimaginable. When Lin Ming let open his spiritual sea, these memories rushed into him like endless waves from a dam that broke apart. Even though Lin Ming was already prepared, he was nearly washed away in this deluge of memories and his divine soul almost lost. He hurriedly guarded his mind, summoning a battle spirit sword and sending it howling out. Catcher. Torch River's ownerless soul was chopped to pieces by Lin Ming's battle spirit. Lin Ming swept through these soul fragments at a frightening speed, immediately discarding large numbers of useless soul fragments. These included Torch River's life experiences, his dealings with others, his friends, foes, and so forth. There were also a great number of memories from when Torch River lured, raped, and intimidated young girls. All of these were discarded by Lin Ming. However, upon seeing these memories, Lin Ming thought more and more that this Torch River died a deserving death. He had simply ruined far too many young girls. After being raped by him, many of these young girls had been savagely tortured to death. He had even gone into the world of mortals, disguising himself as a bandit rapist and violating young girls from all over. The youngest of these was even 12 to 13 years old. For such a disgustingly immoral despoiler to reach this level, it was truly a rare sight. Different people had different pursuits in life. What Lin Ming pursued was the peak of martial arts and to stand on par with the heavens and earth. But this Torch River pursued immortality so that he could enjoy new young girls forever, tasting them all whether it was now, 1,000 years from now, or 1,000,000 years from now. Torch River's ownerless memories were quickly chopped into hundreds upon hundreds of pieces. Like this, 99% of the memories were thrown away by Lin Ming. The only remaining memories were those related to cultivation method inheritances, divine runic arts, and alchemy. At novel been at. But upon reviewing Torch River's cultivation methods, Lin Ming was stunned. Torch River had over 100 different cultivation methods and even a complete transcendent divine might. With the status of an ordinary world king, it was very difficult to ever hope of learning a complete transcendent divine might. But, as a divine runic master, Torch River was wealthier than some great world kings. By spending a massive amount of wealth he was able to obtain this transcendent divine might. And, what left Lin Ming speechless was that this transcendent divine might was called Heavenly Extreme Bliss. It was a dual cultivation method. Out of Torch River's 100-some cultivation methods, over 70 of them were related to dual cultivation. He had really taken the road of obscenity to the limit. Lin Ming threw away most of these cultivation methods. He simply couldn't be bothered with looking at these low-level ones. But, it was too wasteful if this complete transcendent divine might was lost like this. Thinking about this, he kept the Heavenly Extreme Bliss. At this time, Lin Ming seemed to realize something. He momentarily stopped absorbing Torch River's soul fragments. Then, Lin Ming took the spatial ring from Torch River and crushed it. A massive amount of bottles, jars, pill boxes, and all sorts of things came flying out. Among the mess was a pink jade slip that Lin Ming grabbed. This pink jade slip was the complete cultivation method jade slip for Heavenly Extremely Bliss. Torch River had used several hundred thousands of years of time accumulate a massive amount of wealth through his career as a divine runic master. Then, in addition to a mind-boggling lucky chance that he obtained in a mystic realm, he had traded all of that for this complete transcendent divine might jade slip. This caused Lin Ming to sigh. In terms of obscenity, Torch River had done everything in his power to reach the peak. Millimeter. What is that? Xiao Moxian watched as Lin Ming temporarily withdrew from absorbing memories and then specifically took out the jade slip. She could immediately feel that this jade slip wasn't ordinary. Ah, this is a complete transcendent divine might. Lin Ming dryly coughed and awkwardly gesticulated. A complete transcendent divine might jade slip. Xiao Moxian was startled. An ordinary world king had this sort of thing. Not even Teal Mingzi had one. Teal Mingzi only had 2 incomplete transcendent divine mights. Otherwise, he wouldn't have entered Demon Heavenly Palace to study the heaven-absorbing demon art. That's right. Divine runic masters are ridiculously rich. This jade slip was obtained by another world king in a mystic realm, but after that world king tried practicing this cultivation method to 60 to 70%, he realized that it didn't fit him too well. The world king took it out to sell, and in order to obtain this jade slip, Torch River paid a heart-bleeding price, trading half of his lifetime savings for it. I see, can I see what sort of jade slip that is? Xiao Moxian laughed and took the jade slip from Lin Ming's hands. Tip, you can use left, right, and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters.